right, so I'm super excited today. I've got Jeffrey Platts with us today, and we are going to be talking about navigating the dating world for the modern man. This guy right here is the one who helps men navigate the dating world today. And I'm super excited to have you, Jeff. So Jeffrey, Jeff for
Thank you.
short, throwing that out there, Jeffrey. And so I just want to start off, first of all, like, what brought you into this work of wanting to support men in navigating the dating world? What is the need that you're seeing and the gap that you're seeing right now in the space of dating that you're like, this needs to be fixed? I'm the person to do it.
Yeah.
Tell us all about it.
Yeah. Well, thank you for having me. This is great. I know we've connected online a while, and it's great to kind of jam live with you. And so for me, like, my entry into this space, I guess, obviously for a lot of people, often is a personal one, right? Like their own wound or their own itch that they needed to scratch. And so for me, it was, growing up shy, introverted, classic shy guy, nice guy, thinking that he needed to woo woman with like flowers and big grand gestures. And, if I just hang around women long enough, they'll see how awesome I am and how nice I am and fall in love, right? The classic Hollywood nice guy storyline. And then, so basically in my, teenage years and 20s, I kind of started to dive into some of the like pickup artist stuff, The Game, David D'Angelo, like those kinds of things of how to get women attracted to you quickly and sleep with them, right? Kind of in that world. And it's kind of what I consider myself a more of an open-hearted guy, or more kind of integrous guy with integrity. Never really loved it, that kind of approach. There were definitely some good things that came out of it, right? Like the focus on personal growth, focus on communication, focus on, how you dress and all these kinds of things. But just like the goal of like just getting laid and like, cycling through, like you go on a couple of dates and then if she gets too close, then just, ghost her, or, move on to the next one, that kind of whole idea. Because ultimately for me, like I've always been a romantic at heart, is, wanting a relationship with a beautiful, radiant, sexy woman that's also, intelligent and has her purpose and all of these things, which, I think I now have with Vanessa, my wife. But, my 20s, I was really just kind of flailing and just really wanting to, those guys are getting these results. Well, let me just model them. Right. And so for me, and then, transition from the PUA stuff, the pickup artist stuff, I went into more of like the David Data and some of the Dr. Glover's work. And I took this course called the Authentic Man Program, and then I became a facilitator for them later on as well. And that really kind of changed my paradigm around relationships, connection. And so now I kind of teach like a hybrid of a lot of different things in my approach with working with men. And I think the question you asked earlier was around the need, or
what is the gap that you're seeing right now in the space of dating with men out in the world, dating and navigating? Like, what is the gap that you're like, oh my gosh, this needs to be fixed. I need to come in and support these men to really date in this modern world, right?
Yeah. Like for me, the biggest thing is the pendulum swung, with Match.com and apps, the pendulum swung really easily into like the shopping cart mentality, right? Like, porn, obviously the prevalence of porn also helps with that for men, like as far as, if I want the exact thing that I want, and then when I'm tired of it, I just swipe and go to the next one. Or this may be going really well, but I don't need to invest that much time or energy into it, because worst case scenario, I can just go back on the app and find something better, right? And just with ease, right? Or theoretical ease, right? And I think that's a big, it goes for women as well, right? I'm not just knocking on the men here, but like, and so I think there's something where I think the guys that come to me are those guys that are wanting like a relationship, wanting depth, wanting long-term commitment and fulfillment, but it comes in at the expense of being indoctrinated, just through society, through our own habits of the swipe culture, right? Of this, not really wanting to reveal too much as well, like not really wanting to be fully seen, because that's vulnerable and scary. And then she may leave, or she might not like me, or I've been taught that that's not really a masculine thing to do. So those are, the main kind of big ones that I see out there, and really leading, I think, with leadership, especially with like myself and my own history and the nice guys that I work with, is really leading with what you want, right? Like, not hiding behind like non-date dates, right? Like, going out for coffee or going out for, dinner or just, hanging out rather, right? Like,
Yeah, the hangout,
and
like
the
let's hang
hangout, let's
out.
hang out sometime. Right. And so really having men really lead with their intentions, with obviously respect for whatever the woman's answers are, right? Like, as far as
Right.
she's not interested, but like, I think that's a big one as well. So those are, I threw a lot at you just now, but those are the main ones that I see. And I don't know if they resonate with you as far as like, your experience as a woman
Yeah.
over the years.
Well, I love that. I'm excited to hop on this, like to go deeper into this, because when we had our conversation before the show, like months ago, I was like, I just came out of a bit of dating for the first time. So, long story short, was married. I was with someone for 8 years, single for a very short period of time, in a
Okay.
relationship almost right away, for a year and a half. And then after that, I was like, whoa, I need to reprogram what I'm attracted to, which I think is a really important part of dating, and also like our own evolution and knowing what we want, and also addressing, oh, like I was like potentially this was coming from trauma, what I was attracted to. So
Yeah.
I went 2 years of not dating, and it honestly, I told myself it would be a year, but 2 years I was like, I'm not interested in a relationship. I wasn't on any of the apps.
Yeah.
And then I did go on an app or two. And it was really interesting observing people's behavior. Like, I'm obsessed with human behavior. This is my
Mm-hmm.
jam too, and relationships, and just all the dynamics to it. But it's what I've really come to realize in the space of dating, which I'm not really like a dater. It's not really my style. I'm more of a relationship person
Mm-hmm.
too, is a lot of men have a fear of intimacy. And this is what I'm hearing from you as you're talking about the swiping culture and not letting anyone get too close. And I
Mm-hmm.
was recently in conversation with someone, and I'd love to pick this apart because I think there's so much value and juice here. And I know that if you are listening or watching this episode right now, whether you're a woman, a man, or whatever you identify as, you might be experiencing this right now in dating, maybe in your personal relationship that you've been in for a few months or a year, of like this get close and then pull away, this, coming close
Mm-hmm.
and further away. And what I've discovered, it really feels like fear of intimacy, because when we're fully seen as who we are, and we fully accept ourselves as who we
Yeah.
are, it's okay if someone comes or goes. It's like, oh, it's totally fine. But when we're doing this dance, a lot of us have been programmed that that's how we build attraction to people. That's how people
Mm-hmm.
potentially
The
stay
push and pull, like,
interested.
yeah, don't show all your cards.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, the whole the women have their version of the game, which is like the rules, right? That book that, like, the things, to all the different, it's a book. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it
I
came
haven't
out.
heard
It's
it.
it's an
No.
older one, yeah, but basically, has a lot of if this, then that. If he does this, then do this. And if there's this
Right.
and this, and men have their own version of that, don't
Oh my
text her right
gosh.
away, right? All these things.
Sounds
And I
exhausting.
yeah, and I think that's where I think leading with your intention, leading with authenticity around what you're wanting and what you're looking for,
Mm-hmm.
and I think, on the flip side of that, I learned this as well. When you come across vulnerability as a, amazing concept to practice, then you can get into like where you're just verbally vomiting all your insecurities right away,
Oh
right?
my
And then that's a
gosh. We
turn
have to
off as
talk about
well.
that too.
And so, like, that's where I think, like, you calibrate it. I call it pacing your transparency. You pace it,
Right. Right.
to what, first date, cool, let's, share these things. Why not share some things about yourself
Right.
right away? And then, but then, share everything and anything, right? Does that
Yeah.
make sense? Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Let's hone in on a couple of things here right
yeah.
now, because I feel like there's so much to unpack that you just shared right there. And I'm like, Jeffrey, stop.
So
Stop
I know
right
I can be a
here.
little fire hosey,
No,
I
no,
guess.
I like it. I'm the same way. I'm like, okay, so let's go into some depth. So, perfect example. I was going on some dates with someone. I was slightly interested in them. I was like, oh, they seem like a great guy, all these things. And we were in communication a couple months ago, and this man was saying, I'm really used to being chased by women. I'm used to women
Mm,
pursuing me. And him and I went on a couple dates, about a month or so apart. And then I got into a relationship, a short term, like 3-month relationship, which was the opposite. We can talk about that if we want to, or
so
just
with
examples.
this guy or the other, a different guy?
Someone different, someone
Okay.
different.
Okay.
And so with this person, they came back up, a couple months ago, and they're like, hey, like, I'm interested in all this stuff. I'm like, well, I'm someone who needs it's nurturing. Like, it was great going on dates with you. We had a great time, but I just kind of forgot about you. Like, I just kind of forgot about you because I live in the present moment.
Mhm.
And
Wait, this is what he said to you.
no, that's what I said to
Oh, you
him.
said to him. Yes.
I
Okay.
said to him, I said, I live in the present moment and you weren't showing up very much. And so, I ended up getting in a relationship with a guy who was like very full on, probably the
Mm,
opposite spectrum to
sure.
him
Yeah.
because we do the pendulum swing, right?
Yeah.
And of course it feels nice when someone's really pursuing you. But the thing was when we had our last conversation, I was like, yeah, like, he's like, I'm so used to pulling away and that being what draws women in and, gets them to like show up and pursue me. I'm like, yeah, that's not me. So he actually shifted his dynamics in our dynamic of dating. And I was like, oh, interesting. And what I've noticed
Mm,
is when he has pulled away, I'm like, oh, he has fear of intimacy and that's okay because I'm a full on person. Either all in or all out. But it was just interesting to observe him have that awareness of himself of like, this is what I'm used to. But this is
yeah.
the kind of woman I'm attracting within that. And I was like, oh, this is so good. And now we're friends. And I think we're just going to be
Sure.
friends. But it's really interesting when a man or a woman finally attracts what they want. And he's like, I don't know if I'm ready for what I actually want. And I was like, whoa, this is so deep. So I want to pass the ball
Yeah.
over to you and let's dissect this because I know this
Yeah.
is happening for other people.
So yeah, this is great. I mean, this is one, it sounds like you got a guy or this guy has self-awareness,
Mm-hmm.
right, around himself.
Right.
I think the phrase that comes up for me that I use sometimes is like, what's showing up is the syllabus, right? What's
Mm,
showing up in the dating world for a guy or a woman is that's your syllabus. That's your personal growth syllabus to follow and
right.
study.
Yeah.
And so for me, it's like you mentioned, what are you attracting, right? So I think there's two folds there. There's what kinds of partners are you attracting into?
Mm-hmm.
What kind of, these kinds of men keep coming, or these kinds of women keep coming, the same kind. Okay, notice that. And then also noticing what
Great.
kinds of women or what kinds of men are you attracted to, right? So for
Mm,
me, the longest time, like I was attracted to more unavailable women, right? To kind of give their, kind of like a bit of that push-pull experience. And then when I met Vanessa, who as well, my wife, it was a healthy version. So there definitely was a moment of having to calibrate. This feels weird. Like she loves me for who I am. There is this, there's like I'm used to kind of having to feel insecure around around a woman, to then have to convince her to prove
right.
myself overwhelmingly so, right?
Right.
And so I think you paying attention to those two things are really important. And then, and also, I think it's pretty much, I think a requirement in my world that both partners need to be ideally interested in personal growth in general, and then more so viewing the relationship as the vehicle for their growth,
I
right?
love
And
this.
whatever's showing up is the syllabus for both of them. And there may be times
Mm-hmm.
when like relationally one partner has more to learn than the other, or is going through a metamorphosis of one kind and the other one's not so much, or maybe both at the same time. But I think having that shared frame is really
Mm-hmm.
important, because without it, it gets really clunky really fast.
I love this. And I just want to hone in again because you said something really important. So
Mm-hmm.
you said, what are you attracting? So first of all, the first piece of awareness here with, wherever you're at is, first of all, what are you attracting? Be aware of what you're attracting. And the second part is, what are you attracted to? And
Yeah.
so one of the things that I really love to, feel into within myself and is a navigating tool for me, probably in all areas of life, is you attract what you are and or what you believe you're worthy of. So if we
Mm,
go a little bit deeper into this, Jeffrey, within the
mm,
what you're attracting or what you're attracted to, like what you were attracted to that you just broke down was you were attracted originally before, Vanessa, goddess Vanessa came into the picture, you were attracted to women who you felt like you had to prove and overcompensate with. And so it's like when this foreign person comes into the mix, it's like, oh my gosh, like what do I do here? So what was that experience like for you
yeah.
within that? Tell me a little bit about the dynamics of when you and Vanessa started and that those
Yeah.
dynamics, because that is the juice.
Yeah. 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 So I think, yeah, the piece, so Vanessa and I met long distance, right? So she was in
Right.
Toronto, I was in DC. We dated pretty much a year and a half long distance going back. And so the big asset to that, the syllabus that showed up for us was communication as a strength. We really, when someone's long distance, you don't have non-physical touch. You don't have all you have is visual, you have, FaceTime, you have auditory, and that's kind of it. Right. And so like for us, Vanessa and I, we really had a lot of time to talk. So we would spend like hours on like Skype and FaceTime talking and getting to know each other and talking about who we are, what we want, and, what we're working on as individuals and what we want to, create in a relationship. And so that was new to me, right? Because I felt met. I think that's the thing I think a lot of people want to experience and maybe haven't. And it's really sad that we need more of that. The feeling of being met,
Right.
relationally, in friendships, all types of relationships. And so for me, I felt like I was met, and it was, and the discombobulation happened because like I was maybe used to the opposite.
Right.
And having to, opposite to this other gentleman that you became friends with, I was doing the chasing most of the time.
Right.
But chasing without catching, right? That's a different experience, right? When you're just always chasing.
I'm chasing.
I know.
I'm on mission. I'm hunting.
I want to be able to like actually relax, right? Enjoy. But
yeah.
So with Vanessa, it just felt very relaxed and fluid. And like, we felt, like the word, well matched felt, came in, or comes up. And so it kind of had like, oh, this feels, and even, I have a lot of good friends that are, therapists and coaches and all this stuff. So they would kind of give me feedback and be like, hey, what do you guys think of, this dynamic that we got going on? Or after having met her, like all this stuff, like, yeah, I think she's a good match for you. I think she's good because, she's different than what you've been dating in the past, right? She's, and I think it's almost like the idea of like, if you grew up in like a very like turbulent home, let's say, whether it's physically or emotionally or verbally or whatever, then what feels like home to you as an adult, especially relationally, may look like that, right, unless you kind of do the work either before you attract a relationship or while you're in a relationship to change your system, to update, right?
It's
update
like
your operating system. Yeah. So I think that for me is like, and I think, it was really easeful in the beginning. I think the work I'd done on myself, for around communication and authenticity and vulnerability really served me finally, with Vanessa, and continues to, right?
Beautiful.
So, yeah.
I love that. And so a couple of things that can come up when we bump up against potentially what we really want, as you were mentioning, like you manifested Vanessa, you're kind of like with your friends, well, but what do you think? Like, what do you think? Right. Like, and they're like, no, this is good. This is good. It's different than who you've dated in the past. And you mentioned also like really having to build that, that muscle around communication. And so I want to shift it just slightly a little bit. So let's shift gears a little bit. Okay, so that's beautiful. Finally being met, someone who's showing up for you, someone who you feel easeful around, which can also, if your programming is chaos, or you've been dating people in the past where it's very chaotic, or there's a lot of drama, push and pull, it can feel funny, it can feel funky. What are some of the things, out of curiosity, that you notice with men who, when they are met with what they want, what are some of the things that they do, potentially self-sabotaging behaviors, feelings that they have, and ways that potentially they run away from love? And how can potentially a listener right now of this show like tune in, oh, am I doing that right now when I've met the right person? Because I think this is the illumination so that people can reprogram or shift their behavior. So I'd love for you to share a little bit on that.
Sure. I mean, I think a big one for men particularly is kind of like the shutting down, like, what is, and that's where self-awareness comes in, right? Like, what is your response as an individual human? What is your particular study of yourself? What comes up? But I think one that I find a lot of for men is like, they don't want to be seen. And so like the woman thinks that he's pulling away, and he may be, right? That could be an explanation, or it could be that he's like overwhelmed with the level of vulnerability that he's opening his heart to, right? To this woman that he's getting to know and starting to feel feelings for, right? And or a lot of times also not knowing how to express it. Right. Like, I'm feeling all this feeling, but it's coming across as, ambivalence, or it's coming across as me just being silent. And, obviously this is where things like love languages come into play, and like learning each other's love languages and seeing, how do you share love in a way that your partner will receive the best, that's one element. But I think a big one is yeah, being overwhelmed and not knowing how to express it, and
Right.
then shutting down, right?
So
And
it's the
also not
shutting
staying in,
down. It's the
and also,
shutting down. It's the withdrawal. It's the going silent are some of the signs and symptoms of
yeah.
like maybe you're having a challenge with this being met.
And also inexperience with, or just not having the proper tools to stay connected with your partner or woman that you're getting to know
Right.
while it's happening, while the turbulence is happening, right? Like it's almost like, I think a typical guy thing is like, oh, there's stuff going on. I got to go away, figure it out. I'll come
Got to
back
go
when
into
I'm
a
more.
cave for a while.
Yeah, I got to go into the cave, and there's a time and a place for that. This is not a knock on that. I do that, and I need to do that often more than I give myself the permission to. But like to stay like, hey, babe, I'm really overwhelmed right now. I'm really feeling a lot of shame or embarrassment, or whatever. But I want to connect with you, and I know. I don't know what I need right now. Even like saying that, like I don't know what I need, but I love you and I want to connect with you, and then I just need some support. And then, there may be a time and place where like he does go off and get support from his bros or get support from a therapist. There may be time when being held in the space of his woman is the medicine he needs, right? And that the context matters. It's just
right
practicing, right?
So if I were a client of yours right now,
yeah,
and I was just like, whoa, like I really like this person, I'm feeling insecure because they're seeing me fully. I want to run, I want to shut down, I don't know what to do. Maybe I'm wanting to go back on like Tinder or an app because there's all these quick hits of like, all these pretty girls or whatever that will give me the attention that I'm used to. Like, what would you say to someone who you potentially are identifying as, oh, they're kind of pulling away from what they want? What is a process or something that you would do to support someone to gain clarity, and also have more awareness of what's really going on? Because you're talking about, love and hey babe and all this stuff, which is great because it shows that you've built a dynamic with a person. But what if it's like a newer stage thing and they're, you're coaching them and they're like, yeah, like I met someone, but like I don't really know if like the attraction's there. It's not, there's something going on. And I'd love to hear some like tangible things that someone can do in order to identify or shift something in that moment.
Well, the first thing I like to do is really get men into, or in this particular client, into their body, like the sensorial experience. Like what is, get away the story of like, I should do this and this, like the meanings, the oh, I should be with her, she's not the right person for me. Like all those are kind of interpretations, right? Or subjective observations. Whereas like, okay, let's just get into your body. Let's take some deep breaths. What do you feel? What do you notice? What comes up? Tension, expansion, like getting into that and then naming it. I feel, tension in my chest. I feel like, turning in my body or in my groin or whatever it is, like getting to that as a kind of a baseline kind of practice, I think is really super helpful because it kind of creates some space between the interpretations and the meanings and the thoughts and the body, right? That's the first thing. And then I guess going back to, the commitment to themselves, like what's the commitment that they're wanting? Like what's their goal? Like, what are you wanting right now? Like, are you wanting to find a wife in the next 6 months? Is that your kind of goal? Are you stressing yourself unnecessarily with this undue pressure? Are you've been on one date, like kind of like some reality check kind of questions, right? Like you've been on one date, you've been on 2 dates, are you making this more than it needs to be? Is she making it more than, are you responding to actual data? Right? Is this really what's happening? Or is this just your mind spinning out? And if so, let's calm it down. Right. And then also like this is where the body stuff and the breath work kind of is like expanding their physical capacity to hold more, right? Like the nervous system, their energetic systems, like, so they can actually hold more in the maybe legitimate turbulence that they're feeling. Like, and then from all that said, from this space, whether that takes a couple of days or a couple of minutes or an hour or more, like from that space, then decide or reach out or, and when you were saying the other piece too, around like, you were giving examples of all the things he was thinking, is like part of that is sharing that with the woman, right? Because a lot of times women can pick up energy a little more easily than men, right? To generalize to a degree. And then she may be feeling that already, but without you kind of sharing your experience with her, she may not know what the hell's going on, but she'll feel something's off.
what I love about this, Jeffrey, is that it's like these are tangible things that you can do. So,
Yeah.
okay, we're going to do some takeaways right away here. So, right away, it's like if you are experiencing this, get in your body, do breath work, ask yourself, what are you feeling? Put a
Mhm.
word to it, even if it doesn't make sense,
Mhm.
put it out there. Have some space, tune in, do some breath work, expand your capacity. Another really good thing to do is move your body, right? To actually
Yes.
move your body because that's like energy that sometimes is stuck, and then express yourself rather than contracting and going inwards into our thoughts. One of the biggest things that I've noticed in the space of dating, although again, I'm not like a serial dater, I'm like, I was on an app for like a week and I was like, man, this is not for
Yeah,
me. I was like, this is just like weird, right? I'm like, this doesn't feel
it
natural to
is.
me.
Yeah. Yeah.
But is the stories that we make up about how people
Hmm.
respond. And I was in a dynamic with someone for a few months when I was seeing someone, and the stories that came up from that person that they made up around our dynamic and everything was really illuminating to see how quickly, with whatever's going on outside of us as humans, we're
Yeah.
like, oh, well, this person isn't available all day. I'm not a big texter. Like I work throughout the day.
Hmm.
I'm not on my phone a lot. I'm not a texty throughout the day person. I'm like end of day, beginning of day, sure. But
Sure.
like, I don't want someone texting me all the time because I'm probably not going to answer. My phone isn't actually, the ringer is never on. I call
Yeah.
people
Same.
unless
Same
it's an
here.
appointment, right? Like I just love that freedom. But the person I was seeing for a few months was like, oh, like you don't text me throughout the day or you didn't get back to me. I'm like, yeah, because I don't do that with anyone. And that's just not who I am
Yeah.
or what I do. But there were all these stories and insecurities coming up, which was causing um, behavior that was self-sabotaging on that end. And I just watched it all. I was like the observer of a movie throughout the relationship. And then at the end, I was like, this isn't working for me because I'm not being heard with what's actually going on within myself. There's too many
Hmm.
stories going on here. So it's like getting out of your head, dropping into reality, and working with someone like you can be extremely beneficial, especially when someone is wanting to call in that person or shift the way that they've been showing up in a relationship. And I want to pass back over to you because I can tell you have something to add here.
Oh no, I was just saying like I agree with that, with everything you said. Yeah,
Yeah.
because I think it's real, like that's basic, like kind of like you want to have like you want to communicate. Like it's a part of it, like it's
Right.
like as much as it kind of like sounds simply stupid, it's just like, yeah, communicating. Hey, here's how, like even like especially with the generations now, like if you're like 40, let's say, and you're dating a 30-year-old, or there's such differences between the cusps of the generations. Like some people are like, don't call me ever, I don't want to talk on the phone, I just want to text. And for me
Yeah.
it's like, you lose so much in text. And like there's people that are like all, they're old school, they don't want to text, they want to talk on the phone,
Yeah.
or and so I think having these ways of communicating and knowing yourself, what do you, and also in other cases, they may be like, you know what, I'm willing to kind of reach out and text a little more if that's really what makes my partner happy, right? And vice versa. Like
Totally.
I can just work on my own anxiety and relax, that like this, they're not texting me back because they hate me. They're not texting me back because they're busy. And
Yeah.
and you've mentioned that you've had a shared agreement up front. This is what your communications are. So I think that's, really, really key. And one thing that you mentioned, I don't know, it came up, but like the idea of like, ideally the communication in the early stages of a dating relationship should be set up such that if I ask either partner, hey, what's the status of you guys? What do are you guys casual? Are you guys moving toward relationships? There should be like kind of the same answer, right? To a degree, right?
Yeah.
There shouldn't be far off. And that's where I think a lot of people, I had one client that kind of like, are you guys like are you guys like monogamous? Are you guys like, oh, well, I'm not saying that, but I don't, she hasn't really said anything. So I would
Mm,
assume that, maybe we're not. And I'm like, well, if I asked her, what would she say? And from all you guys have, what you've shared, you guys are together all the time. So why wouldn't you be monogamous? But like, why not have that explicit conversation?
right. I think
To
there's a
get to
fear
the
there.
truth. Yeah, there's obviously a fear there,
Hmm.
or a fear or a desire. He prefers his freedom and rather stay in the ambiguity of don't ask, don't tell. If you didn't,
Yeah.
like
Totally.
something like that. So long story short, like I'm just trying to say like that communication, going back to that. And that's where the courage comes in to lead and have the conversation and take the lead
Right.
in being clear, right? With the people you're dating.
Absolutely. And one of the biggest things that I've learned over the last year of just having difficult conversations, which actually aren't difficult anymore, which is great. I'm
Because your
like,
capacity is expanded, right? Like
yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's like there was someone who I met. It was a couple of years ago, and they really liked me apparently, and I never heard from them again. And we connected back in April, and I was like, "Hey, like," and it wasn't like I didn't have any feelings on my end. I wasn't sad or anything like that. We just connected,
Mhm.
and this person was so grateful that I reached out to him because he's like, "Hey, like." I liked you so much that I had to stop talking to you because I had fear I was going to sabotage us and all these like this crazy story. And this was like 2 years ago. And I was
Yeah.
really attracted to this man at that time. I was probably a year and a half single. And I was like, oh, like this guy's a great guy. And then he just kind of ghosted, not in like a, not in
He
a,
ghosted because he liked you in this.
he ghosted. Like we were in communication, we were hanging
Uh-huh.
out, and when I was traveling, and I was like, oh, he's a great guy. Like I thought we were really connected, and then he just kind of like left the planet, and I was like, oh, okay, whatever. And I was like, I think I just got ghosted. And I remember
Yeah.
like feeling into it. I was like, this feels really weird. I was like, okay, whatever, no big deal. And then there was another instant where we were going to see each other in a group, and he bailed last minute for a group trip, and I was like, oh, weird. And I was like, I feel like this guy's avoiding me, and I was like, okay. And I'm not an anxious attachment. I'm very secure.
Yeah.
But I was like, interesting. So, a year or a year and a half goes by, and then we connect, and then he's just confessing all of his feelings for me. Like,
Mm.
nothing ever stopped. And I was like, wow, like I am learning so much about men or my
Yeah.
experience with men and what's really going on. Cause I was like, oh, maybe he just got a girlfriend right away, or maybe he just wasn't interested in talking to me. It was actually the opposite was true. He liked
Which
me
is
so
so
much.
wired. Yeah. It's so, I mean,
And I
like
was
this,
like,
and that's what I'm talking about.
what?
Like, it defies logic, right? To think like, hey, I like you too much that I'm going to ghost you, have you think that I don't like you. And then 2 years later, I'm going to come back and I'm going to tell you that I liked you and I liked you still. And I want to like pick up where
Yeah.
we
And I
left
was
off. And it's
like,
like, so like,
he's
yeah,
like, I
it's that
have the
kind of,
tools
it's,
now. And I was like, well, that's nice, but I'm
yeah. And
good.
maybe in other situations that could have worked, or rekindled anything, but it's kind of classic. I'm sure I've
Yeah.
done a variation of that where like, or the other variation of that I see more often is than that, honestly, is like the guy that likes the woman, doesn't want to share that romantic or sexual interest with them, then
Right.
just hangs around as friends for
Oh
as
yeah.
long as possible,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then either one day he finally confesses or he gets fed up and gets angry at the woman for not reciprocating. And I'm like, but you never told her anything. So how would she know?
I
And
know.
then, and so for me, it's like, I think a lot of times men actually end up friend zoning themselves because they don't
Oh yeah.
lead with their interest and their desire.
And then it actually gives the woman the opportunity to say, yeah, I'm wanting
Yeah,
to explore
exactly.
this or not. But that space of in between, it doesn't work for anyone.
No,
And
it's yeah.
and then there's the opposite side of things, which I've also experienced. And I've really picked up that this comes from more of like a lack or insecurity space, is the man who's like pursuing too hard. You know what I'm saying? Like it's like,
Yeah.
over the top gestures. This is the person I was dating for a few months. And at first I was flattered because like, being single for a couple of years and then someone like being over the top, it was nice, but I was also like, you can just calm down.
Yeah.
But it didn't stop. It didn't stop. It didn't
Well, it sounds
stop.
like it feels like it's overcompensating. Like it's like,
It
it's
was.
not, and
Yeah.
it's also, it sounds it can feel disingenuine or
Hmm.
disingenuous because you don't know somebody that well, right? Like in the
Yeah.
first 2 or 3 dates, like you're doing all these amazing gestures or spending all this time and energy and money on this person. Like you don't, are they, not that they don't deserve it, but it's more like it's
It's
not
overwhelming.
calibrated to the pace of the connection,
It's so
right?
overwhelming. And my body was feeling really overwhelmed in the dynamic. I really liked the person. I was like, this is so sweet. But then over time, I realized that, when we're insecure about who we really are, we haven't done the inner work, which is a big part of what you support people with,
Yeah.
is we can put on this show. And this is something I hear a lot from women. And I'm sure it's very, aligned with men too, is, a lot of us women feel tricked. It's like you
Hmm.
start dating someone and they show up in a way and you're like, wow, they're so amazing. They're so this, they're so that. And then all of a sudden there's like this bait and switch and you're like, oh, like you baited and switched. And so a lot of women, at least for myself, like I'm very aware going into the space of starting to get to know someone slowly, all of those
Hmm.
things, because there is this bait and switch, there's this role, there's this potential game or whatever it is, that a lot of men do as a way to catch a woman, right? But it doesn't,
Yeah.
women don't stick
And
around if they figured that out.
Well, that's where I think a lot of the, a lot of times the pickup artist stuff, or like just like
Mhm.
getting really good at dating,
Right.
like initial attraction, banter, humor, all that stuff, getting her turned on, amped up
Right.
and
Right.
interested in you. But then if you're not doing the other work underneath personally, and also just in general, like, it's almost like, I'm sure you maybe had this experience where you go on dates and like, it's always like fun and upbeat and every, like, it's like date number 6 and like, you're always like upbeat, having a good time, laughing, but there's no depth. You haven't like talked about anything about family or personal or challenges or anything. It's like you want to have that. You want to show the full dimension of a person, both in what
Right.
you share and also what you're seeing in the person you're dating. I think that's where I think a lot of guys think they can just like throw humor or attraction or money at in the early stage, and that's enough,
Yeah. And I
right? Where I
think,
think a lot of women, I think,
mhm.
are craving, presence and depth
Mhm.
and the other things, right? But like presence and depth and the ability to hold space for all of it.
Whatever
Yeah,
wants to come up. I love this. And that's the thing. I feel like there's a realness that wants to come through. There's this authenticity that wants to come through. And then there's the other side of things. Okay. So we've talked
yeah,
about a couple. We talked about creating space. I want the woman to chase me, the game, which is more of the game, right? It's like,
yeah,
oh, this has worked when I was in my teenage years and in my 20s and my 30s. No, when I'm 40, it's like, oh, I got to keep going for those 20-year-olds. I'm not knocking anyone who's dating someone significantly younger than them, but I might be
yeah,
curious of, I wonder why that is. Why are you
yeah,
potentially? And this is something I brought up to this person recently. I was like, it's interesting that you're dating people so much younger because of this dynamic, I bet. And we joked about it. It's we're
yeah,
friends, but it's like, the game doesn't work when you want to attract someone who can fully meet you. So we talked about that. We covered the, ghosting. I really do believe a lot of the time, if you are being ghosted, it can definitely have to do with fear of intimacy and being seen, the person not having the right skills and
yeah,
communication. And then the third piece, or the fourth piece that we talked about, is really about the overcompensating up front. I'm really aware of all of these now. The next piece that I've been aware of too, and because I'm in the space of coaching and healing and all that stuff, is men thinking that you're their coach or their mom or their healer. And it's just like, ick, right? So it's like, we
yeah,
want vulnerability. We want a man to be open. We want all of these things. However, a lot of men who are doing the healing work, potentially in men's groups and other things, sometimes they can just show up with all their baggage at the beginning and wonder why the woman's not attracted to them. So I'd love for you to speak on that, because you touched on that earlier. And I'm like,
yeah,
this is really good and really a
yeah.
conversation that isn't being had enough, I don't think.
Yeah, I mean, I think, and that's where like, one of the things that well, I can talk about, the 4 stages of dating.
Yes,
It's a good
please.
segue because the first stage is it's the foundation, right?
Mm,
It's the foundation of everything. It's like, your career, your money, your social life, your relationship with other men, your brotherhood, your health, your family, your spirituality, your purpose. All those things are things that I think, for me, my personal story was that I avoided all those things and used getting women as a very sexy and seductive drug to compensate for the lack of fulfillment in all those other areas. And so what happens is I would be the bull bait and switch. I would be really good at connecting and dating and banter and have her feel really safe and seen and turned on. And then after 2-3 months, the rest of the things that are not working in my life become a reality or make themselves, they pop out like a
I know
groundhog.
that people who are watching right now and listening, they're like, I mean, you might be guilty of this. Just take a moment to breathe in, breathe out. And
Uh-huh.
maybe you're experiencing this right now in your dating life. And you're like, why are there so many bait and switchers? Okay, keep
Yeah.
going.
So I'm a recovering. Um, so yeah, so that's why I think, the guy that like, is not fulfilled in a lot of those areas and they're not thriving, you need to have that. It's not you have to have them all checked off before you start dating, but have them having some forward momentum in each of those areas. Right. And then, yeah. And then, be out there dating. And then that's the first phase. And the next phase is, I call it the attraction phase. You're out there attracting and meeting and exploring and all this stuff. Right. And then the next phase is, co-creating. You kind of like, hey, you're the woman I want to co-create with. I want to build a partnership with you. And then the final phase, which is kind of more the expansion phase, right? Like, hey, we are a couple and we are here to expand each other, expand ourselves, and expand the world through our partnership, right? So I kind of those things, and I call it the foundation because that doesn't go away. Like a lot of guys will think, oh, let me just get all these things checked off and then I can just let those go on cruise control. and now I can just be, you know, happy in my relationship forever. Right. It's not, because like,
Right.
because that's where you see the quintessential, you know, idea of a guy that loses his friends, he gets married, loses his friends. 20 years later, he's out of shape. His money's kind of not solid. His friendships are gone. And then he gets divorced and he's back at square one because he didn't take care of the foundation.
Right. That's so
Right.
important. The
You know, or
foundation,
like,
purpose, fitness,
yeah, all
health,
those. Yeah.
family.
Play, you know, where you live, your home, all those things. And because like, and the biggest one, if I was going to like pick one to kind of really, well, not just only one, but like a big one that's really important is friendships with other men. Like getting support from solid friends, not just activity buddies that you go fishing with or go play football with, but literally guys you can open up with, like guys that you can actually, they know your stuff. They know all your shit, right? They know everything. They're not just, you know, you're not putting on like if you're putting on a front with them, you know, like, oh yeah, I'm doing great, man. How about you? I'm good, bro. Like not that, but like actual, like, how are you? You know, you can
Yeah.
really feel safe to answer without judgment or
Yeah.
shame or trying to fix you and get you to change or whatever. But like, I think that's a big one because that prevents what you were sharing a minute ago is around the guy relying on his wife or partner for
Yeah.
everything.
And that becomes unsexy. Number one, it becomes
Yeah.
unsexy if you're your partner's therapist. So don't make your partner your therapist or your healer, or your
Yeah.
coach, because that person's not going to want to have sex with you anymore. I'm just saying
Yeah.
it's true. And then the next piece, just to go on exactly what you're saying here, Jeffrey, is around your inner circle. Like I have a rule within my inner circle that I have probably like 9 people in my inner circle up until like probably the last year. There was only about 5 people that I could trust with any part of my life. Like I could literally be like, they have my best interest in mind. I can trust them with everything.
Yeah.
I have a rule, and like truth is one of my top values. So like if someone's not truthful, they're not in my inner circle. And a
Yeah.
lot of people don't know what their core values are, but beyond that is within your inner circle, it's so important to have people that, yeah, they're checking in on you, but
Yeah.
they also have no problem calling you out if
Yeah.
you are out
Support
of
and challenge.
integrity with
Yeah.
your true identity, right? So that's huge. Thank you for bringing that up, because
Yeah.
and this is what I'm hearing a lot too with men, is a lot of men who are in relationship aren't connected with a good circle of friends. And it's like, I think that's a foundational part. So that's huge.
Yeah. And I think that's a big one too. And have that intention and that desire. And like, I think, you know, I know there's a crisis of like masculine friendships and whatnot in this country. And like, you know, people in general, kind of like having close friends, right? That they can rely on. I think just like, and it's just kind of start small, like have your goal maybe to have like 1 or 2 or 3 really solid friends. If you're kind of coming from a place of real scarcity in that department, right? Don't,
Yes.
you know, like I can see myself getting sucked into like seeing these big photos of 20, 30 men, you know, huddled up in a tribe and like rocking
Right.
and rolling. And that's great if that's accessible to you and you have that. But the majority of men can't just fly to Austin or San Diego and just have that kind of huge bro tribe, right? Immediately.
Yeah.
Not even, that may not even be the medicine you need, right? Maybe you just need like 3 dudes in your little town in Tennessee that you can like really just drop in with, be real. You know, maybe you push each other to challenge each other to like improve your communication and you kind of be physical, go out in nature, just a really fulfilling friendships, right? That support you and challenge you at the same time.
Absolutely. And it goes like, if we really look at this a little bit deeper, so there's your inner circle, there's your outer circle, there's your outer circle, and then there's the rest of the world. I think of like friendships and relationships, they go in different circles. And I teach a little bit on this. I have something on my YouTube channel if anyone wants to go a little bit deeper specifically on that. But it's like the inner circle, it's like shared values, like your shared values, you can trust them with anything. If you can trust like 5 people in your life with anything, you are rocking and rolling, you know, and you understanding what you can share and trust them with. And then the other circle is like potentially that tribe or of people in Austin or wherever it is, where you go and you have an experience, you know, a couple times a year. You can have these experiences with them, but are they actually your inner circle? Maybe not. And then there's the rest of the circle beyond that, where it's like cool people you collaborate with, you do things with, you see. But we have to understand, and I think this is really important when it comes to dating, is we have to understand the difference between our inner circle our inner outer circle or outer circle and the rest of the world. And I think the
Yeah.
most amount of pain and frustration, chaos in relationship, betrayal, all those things comes from actually not knowing what our top 3 values are and dating and allowing people in our inner circle that actually belong in our outer circle. And so this is going to segue into the next piece.
And just one thing, and
go ahead, yeah.
one source of pain that I found for myself is like me presuming that I'm inner circle in someone else's life when I'm actually I actually am outer circle. I'm like, wait,
oh yes,
paying attention to like, oh, they're not showing much interest in reciprocity in this relationship, or I reveal things and they don't reveal things back. And so like, just to kind of be discerning and be like, hey, you know what? I'm not feeling met. Again, that feeling of being met. Yeah. Maybe I should put them in my outer circle because maybe they put me in their outer circle.
Yeah. And you don't tell them that they're in your outer circle.
You don't have these conversations like, hey, I just put you in my outer circle.
If people aren't opening up to you to the level that you're opening up to them, especially in like the newer phases of relationship or after a certain amount of time, then it's actually what I've realized as far as my history with friendships and all of that is it's usually because they're not necessarily trustworthy. And it doesn't mean that they're going to go and do something crazy behind your back, but they're not trustworthy in the space of you, potentially should discern a little bit more about what you're sharing with them and the time and energy and expectations, because we can have these expectation hangovers or traumas or betrayals in our relationships of all kinds, like female, male, all the things, because we actually let someone closer in than they belonged.
And I think it's very just one last piece. And it's very like easy to get into that when you meet somebody in a personal growth context, I think.
Yes.
You mean I'm at a workshop. Oh, we shared for 3 days, all this drama and trauma. And then
oh my gosh. Yeah.
Presume that you guys are close, but it was just a moment. It's like a
and
vacation.
not only that, I think it's really easy for us to, I was in conversation with someone the other day about this. It's easy for us to make up a story about who someone is based on something that they're a part of. Like, so you know what I mean? Like, oh, this person's a personal development coach, or they help people with trauma,
Enneagram, and I am too.
or they're a relationship coach or whatever. It's like, they can be into that stuff. They might even be a teacher in it, but there's a very small percentage of people that are actually doing the work and are living what they teach. So that's one of the things I've noticed. And I find sometimes this is going to be horrible to say, but it's just truth. Some of the people who are teaching or preaching some of this work into the world actually are the opposite in real life. So it's like taking the time, noticing, tuning into your body, all those things. I want to segue though. I really want to go into the next piece because it's really important. You mentioned something at the beginning before we hopped on here, and you were talking about the difference between men, like navigating dating, the well-matched man, like finding a woman that he can fully meet versus the woman that's going to impress his friends. I want to dive into that. Pass it over to you to talk about that before we wrap up, because this feels really connected to inner, outer, etc. Like what looks good versus alignment and truth.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the stereotypical thing is like the trophy wife, right? Like, the guy that wants a hot, it's maybe it's from the 80s. I don't know when that first came up, that term, but like, it's a very horrible term, but yeah, the woman that looks good on your side, that, and that's almost like kind of like goes back to like what we're talking about, like, what are you attracted to, right? Like maybe you're attracted to a certain type of woman, physical or energetic, or, type of woman that is what you really are turned on by, but like, it's not what your friends would, or it's not what you see in the porn sites, or it's not what you see growing up, or it's not who your friends are married to or partnered up with. And to be okay with that, that's where I think the self-awareness comes in. Like, what kind of person do you really want? And also noticing, does this woman feel like home to you? And does she feel like a safe home? Right? Not just a home, because home could be turbulent, right? But like, does she feel like you're an emotional, a home for like your soul and your heart to really rest in, and that you can feel both supported and challenged by. And yes, obviously turn on and looks and all that stuff. You want to have all that, great sex and stuff. And there's also something to be said for like, when, I know there's some teachers that say like, when the attraction is super, super high, that it's actually can be detrimental because it hijacks your brain, right? So like you can't like really discern, especially, I personally, there's no hard and fast rule, but I generally think it's wiser to slow down and have sex later on when you're dating, not in the first date, or, like get to know somebody. If you're looking for monogamy in a long-term relationship, I think it's wiser to do that.
Right.
But to answer your question, I think I think, yeah, having that discernment of what you're attracting and who you're attracted to, I think is a big piece of that, because yeah, I mean, it's part of it.
Yeah.
Right.
And I just think it's so interesting because we can have this idea of what we want. And when we manifest it, we can be like, oh, this isn't what I want. I've actually, one of the things that I've done in the past, I've only done this two or three times
Mhm.
I've written down exactly what I want in a partner, and I've always manifested it.
Yeah.
And then I quickly discover, I mean, not quickly discover, sometimes it took me a year and a half with one. I realized, oh, there's some really foundational pieces here that aren't there. I was like, I want to have like someone I can have fun with, someone I'm a best friend with, and like all
Yeah.
these things, but I left out values. And I
Hmm.
left out I left out values, which was a big one. So values to me is really the foundation of a house. Without values, it's going to come crumbling down. So it's like those people
Yeah.
that are really fun. And I've done this recently with a couple of people who have presented themselves. I'm like, oh, you'd be a really fun person to hang out with as friends. We can laugh together. We
Uh-huh.
can have wine together. We can potentially go on adventures together. But as far as like, being sexual with you or anything else, like I know what I want and I'm not going to entertain something that's not it. It's like, oh, you could be an adventure buddy. But like, as
Sure.
far as
And there's
being
a
your
time and a
girlfriend,
place for that.
those are
Yeah,
two different
totally.
things. And I think it's important to know the difference, right? Just being radically honest with
Yeah. And I
yourself.
think, and I think, yeah, that's the thing. Like, that's where I think, the guys that I work with are guys that are ready for partnership, right? There's a
Right.
different gravitas, there's a different energy, that you show up as when you are kind of
Mm-hmm.
like, I'm a boyfriend looking for a girlfriend. I am a husband looking for a wife. Like
Right.
there's a space that I'm creating, there's a space that I'm holding, an energy that I'm carrying myself with,
Mm-hmm.
that I'm waiting and discerning of that. Not from my ego place. So I'm bestowing a blessing of a woman, allowing her into my life. It's not that. It's more like I want a woman to be by my side, that we can create this, a beautiful relationship and a beautiful life together.
Yeah, and that really does feel like the highest level of relationship is co-creation, like someone who can like fully meet you and help you become the
Yeah.
best version of yourself, push you a little bit, nurturing, you feel safe and all those things, but you're on the same path. You have a similar vision of what you want to create, because you can't change who someone is and you can't change what they want for their future. So if your futures align and you have those core values and everything else, I think that's like a home run. Potentially the attraction and other things
Yeah.
need to be there,
And
but like, yeah.
I think the thing is too, I can't stress this part enough. It's like you're co-creating a relationship of two. Like
Absolutely.
your relationship is going to look like it's supposed to look like for the two of you. And this is where
Mm-hmm.
communication comes in, shared agreements, exploration, all these things, like to not really compare. We see all these, hashtags, couple goals, relationship goals, right? It's like, and you can get inspired by those, but like really, how often you have sex, how often you communicate, whether you sleep in the same bed together, whether you, keep your finances separate or together, or, how often you guys communicate, when you're traveling, like all those things are unique to you guys. But that's where
Mm-hmm.
communication comes in, knowing what works best for the two of you, self-awareness, and correcting as you go along. I think that's the main thing, to know that you're creating a secure home base for the two of you, that is created by the two of you. Yes, you can
Mm-hmm.
get input from coaches, from therapists, from books and other models and stuff, but that I think is a really important point that I think too many people just don't acknowledge enough, is it's your relationship. You create it how you
Mm-hmm.
want it, and especially in the whole, discussion around like, masculine, feminine, and polarity and dynamics, like there's always like these like very dogmatic things of like, this men should be this way, women should be this way, right? And if you're not, then something's wrong and you're with the wrong partner, or you're not doing it right. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, okay, look, those are principles to like look at. And for the two of you, are you feeling fulfilled? Are you feeling inspired? Are you growing individually? Are you growing together? Do you feel satisfied? Are you feeling connected? Like those are the things I think
Mm-hmm.
that are the metrics, the values of which to discern, are, do we want to change or not change things?
Absolutely. I love this conversation. I feel like we could literally talk for hours about it because I geek
I
out.
know.
I actually like I dissect my relationships. I'm like, oh, that what's going on there. I'm all like, I love it. And I'm like, I'm just sharing my dating experience, very
No,
limited, by the
I love
way.
the personal examples.
But
Yeah,
it's
it
but
helps.
it's like true. It's like, oh, I'm just the observer and I'm not taking anything personally. And I'm blown away most of the time by, oh, that's what's really going on there.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. And I think this is a big lesson for potentially us all to learn, is in the space of navigating relationships, to to not take anything personally, because it usually has nothing to do with you. And if you're showing up, you're being clear, you're communicating, you're putting your whole heart out there, whatever happens, if you fully show up to meet a relationship and you're being transparent and opening and doing the things, it's okay if someone walks away. It's okay if it's not a good match. But when you start stepping away from yourself, when you're betraying yourself, when you're not paying attention to the red flags, the deal breakers, the subtleties, you're not communicating, you're moving away from it rather than leaning into it. Those are the parts that are going to leave you at the end of a relationship, whether you're dating someone or actually in it. Those are the parts where you're going to be left at the end of the relationship having regrets because you didn't honor yourself, which is really what I'm hearing in this relationship. I mean, this conversation here, you know, and a relationship. This relationship right now.
This 1 hour little relationship.
And so, okay, so as we wrap things up, I want to talk about some of the key takeaways that I'm hearing, and then anything else you want to just add in to wrap things up.
Sure.
So I'm really hearing about, it's about co-creating, knowing your values, understanding that you got to take care of yourself first, your purpose, your well-being, your family, know who you are, all of those things before even like really putting yourself out there, because a lot of people put themselves out there and then later they end up kind of like sabotaging themselves, the relationship, they let themselves go. So stage one is all about taking care of those pieces. The second part's about being out there, socializing and all of that. The next part is really about meeting that connection, right? Is that right? The stage three?
Yeah.
And then beyond
choosing,
that,
you choose like, hey, I've sealed the exits on the other ones and I'm ready to go dive in with you. And
yes,
the one thing I always like say to people is like, when you decide to commit to become like partners, boyfriend, girlfriend, like you're committing to the exploration of the two of you, like you and them together. I want to explore you with no other interference.
Right.
Not like I'm committing to you forever. Like a lot of guys, I think they're afraid to even say like, I want to become exclusive. Yeah. I want to become exclusive because it means I have to commit to you forever. Now you're going to want to have babies with me. We're going to get married, all these things like, maybe, you know, after 6 months of that, you guys get more clear on that. But in the initial stages, it's totally, and I think good if you're looking for a monogamous relationship to seal the exits and go the distance.
Yeah,
with
close
that
the back
partner.
doors. Close the back doors. This is so big. So many men and women, I'm sure, but men don't want to close the back doors. And it's like, if you really want, if you're actually committed to that person or seeing something through, you have to close the back doors, because women can feel it too. Like women can feel when a man hasn't closed the back doors.
It's
and
energetic
woman,
too. It's not just like saying it. Right?
And women won't entertain that if they're
deleting
tuned in
the
with
apps,
their body. They won't.
Deleting the profile, right?
They won't.
Like it's one thing to delete the app, but then you got the profile still active on the app. So when you pull back in the app,
oh my gosh,
it's still there, right?
I have a funny story. So this guy that I was seeing, I think it was the first, and we were talking about overcompensating, right? There's a lot of that going on, and respect and love to this person. But he's like the first week or something we were together, he's like, hey, I want you to have the logins to my Instagram. And like, I want you, you know, like it was really upfront.
You can trust, like, Sally, you can trust me. You can trust me. Trust me. You can trust me.
Yeah. And I was like, whoa, this is intense. And so I was like, and like, I so trust my intuition that I actually don't need any external validation for anything to decide what I'm doing with my life or if I'm with someone or not. So I was like, you know, he was like very upfront and all this stuff because he's all in, he wants to marry me, have my babies. It was very intense at the beginning. And I was just like, whoa, like, okay. And I just observed it. I was in it. I was fully committed to exploring the relationship. And I said to him, I said, listen, I said, this is really like nice of you. And now I see it as a bit of a red flag because it was upfront too much. Right. And sometimes when you're overly in one way, it's usually sometimes the opposite is what's really going on. And so I was just like, thank you so much for wanting to open your world up to me and to go through your Instagram together. But that's not my style. First of all, I never snoop on anyone. I said, and if in any moment I don't trust you, I'm just going to not be in the relationship anymore because I trust myself enough. And he's like, whoa, you wouldn't have a conversation with me? And I was like, no, because I just trust myself enough. And that scared the shit out of him because later in the relationship, I was just like, I don't trust this guy. And then I was out so quickly because my body was being like, nope, no. So it's like, you know, it's like trusting yourself enough, whether you're a man, woman, whatever the dynamic is, to just know that your body, getting back into your body, as you mentioned, Jeffrey, is like, that's where you have the answers. But that up front was so odd to me. I was like, oh, wow. Like if you ever have to snoop on someone or you don't trust them.
It'd be like,
that's a deal breaker right there. You don't have to do anything. You just trust and leave or whatever you need to do.
Yeah. Well,
Right.
yeah. And I think the thing that I would kind of, if I was coaching the guy, I'd be like, like what has you wanting to share this with her? What
Right.
has you, what's, tactically, it's not a smart move. It's not really a good thing to do because it pushes them away. It has her be more suspicious from a tactical perspective, but from a, under the hood perspective, like what has you wanting to share that? Even
Need to
like
be
from a,
accountable. Like, I don't get it.
yeah, but
Felt
even from
weird
like
to me.
as a conversational tool, like I'll say sometimes, like, what has you sharing this right now? Or what has you wanting this?
Yeah.
Like to kind of ask, like, what's underneath, right?
Yeah.
Like
What's
what is
beneath that?
this? Yeah. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's a funny story.
Well, the thing is that I've really learned about in all relationships of all kinds is projection, right? So
Hmm.
oftentimes what we fear someone else will do is actually our true behavior or default settings, right? And so
Yeah.
um yeah, I mean everything made sense in the end when it was over, and I was like, this is
Yeah.
this is such a good lesson for love and understanding in relationships, and just trust yourself. It
Yeah.
doesn't matter how someone's showing up, trust your feelings, right? Because that's what matters most. But I
Well,
just found that really interesting. I was like,
yeah.
whoa, bro, I don't need your
Well, yeah.
Instagram. What do you?
Well, the tool that I kind of like really, use a lot is the idea of like shared reality, right? To have that be a goal and a practice as a couple, like to know, like, hey, this is, we're looking at the same thing. Like what, it doesn't mean that you have to agree with
Right,
the other person's reality, like their
right.
experience rather, like, so,
Yeah,
oh, I feel that you were, this was how you interpreted the situation. I don't necessarily agree with that interpretation, but I get it. I can see it as that, and vice
totally,
versa. And that's where
totally.
the hard work is, like to allow
Mm,
the conversations to be clunky. I'd rather have a conversation be clunky and heartfelt than perfect or not said at all.
yeah.
Right. And that's, I think, a big
Mm-hmm.
thing that people need to remember, that give yourself a break and like just practice the stuff. It's all practice. I still
Yeah.
practice. I don't come at this like I'm a perfect guru on relationships or
No.
expert, but like I practice this, and this is what needs to be
Mm-hmm.
practiced. And partnership is a
Yeah.
great tool for that. The
Oh my gosh,
best
it's
probably.
such a mirror. And the thing is, it's like if you're insecure, you're feeling away, what most people tend to do is they tend to go into, distraction mechanism. Maybe that's going
Yeah,
on
your
the
patterns
apps.
come up for sure.
Trying to make the other person feel insecure because you're feeling insecure. Like that's what I really recognized in this past dynamic I was in. I was like, what this person is bringing out within me as far as my feelings, this is how they're
Mhm.
feeling in this moment.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. And so it's like not taking anything personally, being understanding what projections are, having the conversations. Hey, I'm feeling insecure right now, or I'm feeling this way, or the story that I made up about this. And it's like you can actually be met and resolve it. But when we go into these tactics and mechanisms around trying to feel safe, we can push what we want away from us. And so I'm just loving this conversation, Jeffrey. Thank you
Yeah,
so much
same.
for being
Thank you.
here. Like we could talk for hours. So if you were to leave our listeners with one message, one question, what would it be
Oh, that's a good one.
when it comes to
Um,
dating,
yeah, I would
love?
say, like, how are you showing so basically, for the single man or woman that's dating right now, and out there, playing
Mhm.
the field rather, if you will,
Playing the field.
out there, going on dates, is like, is what are you noticing in the kinds of experiences and people that you're attracting into your
Hmm.
experience? And then
Right.
what is your role in that? Like, how are you co-creating this? Like, in
Mm,
what way, is it just because we could take a lot of times this victim mentality? Oh, all men are this, or all women are this. Like,
right.
there's just no good men out there. And like,
Right.
or I've had all these experiences with women and they must all be bitches or whatever. Those are the
Right.
extreme examples, but like there's a co-creation. There's some way that you're showing up that is also kind of impacting. I'm not saying it's like a
Hmm.
one-to-one thing, like The Secret or something, but like there's a co-creation going on, right? And how
Hmm.
can you either change what you're doing, maybe change what you're tolerating, maybe saying no more quickly to the kinds of partners that you're, rather than going on for 3 months dating somebody that is a wrong fit. Maybe
Bro, I
you're
needed to
after the
see it out
first
till the
date.
end.
Yeah,
Sometimes we got to
maybe after
turn
the
all the
first date.
stones. Okay. I'm just saying, I'm one of those persons. I need to turn all the stones. And
Yeah,
I was like, okay, I learned my
just to be sure,
lessons.
right?
Now I'm writing a book on it. So it's all good.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I
It's
mean,
funny. There's this one blogger that was like, I remember back, it's just like a while back, was like
yeah.
documenting all of her horrible dates. And I thought
Right.
of that as like, and then she kept giving horrible dates because she needed to to have more content for her blog. Right. So it's kind of like, that's the pure, obvious example. Like, so you have a blog that you have to write about your horrible date experiences, but you keep on having horrible dates that you keep complaining about. And so it ended up kind of becoming this self-fulfilling prophecy. I'm like, why don't you just maybe change the blog or it's just,
yeah. Change the script.
Yeah. Change the script, really. Yeah.
Yeah. And this is the stories we tell ourselves. Well, Jeffrey, it's so great having you here today on the Radically Aligned Show. And, radical alignment is all about stepping into truth, owning who you are, doing the inner work, living and leading from the heart, being on purpose, making your impact, being your self-expressed version of who you are in the world, and really carrying the wisdom on that journey. So I really do believe that today you really shared quite a bit of insights where it comes to like matters of the heart. If you are interested in learning more about what Jeffrey does, his information is in the bio below, and I highly recommend leaving a review for this episode. What was your biggest takeaway? What was your win, your insight, your, oh shoot, I do that thing? We want to hear from you. Sending you all lots of love. And again, thank you for being here, Jeffrey.
Thank you for having me. This was a blast. Thank you.